Welcome to our final webinar of the year. And we just thought that as our Christmas present to you, hence the time of year, the festive theme would be to give you some tips on how to become truly data enabled. Because, so far in this series, we've kind of told you what was important, how to actually go about doing your data strategy, and how to go about implementing data governance. So, that's all very well. And I even had somebody this week send me a message say, could we have a call in the new year? Because, they'd identified data owners and data stewards, and, they're struggling as to what to do next to actually make things happen. So we wanted to do a session answering, people's questions about how do you actually become data enabled. So I think the obvious thing to say is that we ought to define what data enabled means. So shall I hand over to you for that one, Alex?
Yeah, let's have a go with that. So if we look at the slide, we can see I've done a university slide here, but really I think you could change the word university and take almost any organization. And what we talk about when we talk about being data enabled is, a lot of things that we talked about in the first three of these webinars. You start off with your strategy. It's a whole thing about having the end in sight. In fact, if any of you have been following us on LinkedIn, our 12 days of strategy, our last one today was what happens if I don't have a strategy? And the answer is that you might all end up at the same destination, but there's no guarantee. You'll get lots of activities that are unaligned. It's very difficult for it to become sustainable, and we'll talk about that. Because you haven't got an end point, you're not all aiming the same place. So it's really important that you start off with a strategy and you're very clear about what that strategy is. So it is focused on sort of prioritizing things and making sure you're doing the things that the organization needs and all of that kind of stuff that we talked about before. So that's your foundation. And then, we talked about, how do you land your strategy, and you land it on your governance framework. And that's what Nicola was talking about last time, the time before, all of the things that a governance framework will give you, and then how do you sustain that framework? We're going to answer that question. And at the end of it, it's really data-enabled university is really about cultural shift. It's about everybody understanding that data is this fourth asset after staff and finance and buildings or whatever, and that you use it to create a competitive edge, and that you use it to differentiate yourself from others in your sector, and that you use it to improve your customers or your student experience, or you use it to improve your staff experience. So it is seen as an asset that you could draw on to do all of these tangible things that will improve the performance of your organization, or as I put it here, as a university. So I think it's hard to say, could I give you a business glossary data-enabled sort of definition we could all agree about? Maybe not, because I think it's different for every organization. But it's very much that data sits as a well-understood, a well-managed, a well-trusted asset that's in support of the organization. And as importantly, the culture of the organization has moved so that it is seen as that, and is treated as that, and people understand their responsibilities within it. So that's kind of my view. What do you want to add to that, Nicola?
I think you kind of covered everything. I think you're right, and I think that the culture is the key thing here, because you need all the things that you we're talking through, and here on the slide. You need that structure, but if you don't address the culture, nothing else happens. And I think that is why people forget that. They think they can just design the framework. They can just say, this is what we're going to do, and it just happens, and it doesn't. It takes a lot of effort to achieve that culture. I think that's the main thing I would say.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, I always talk about getting over the hump. People talk about, oh, it's really hard to get people to go through a data strategy. It's like, that's the easy bit. Like, that's the fun bit. Like, the hard bit is turning that into something that you can sustain. And we'll leave this slide up because we're going to kind of point to it again on some of the questions that you've asked us. So, but I want to talk about sustainability, because that's the one we get asked about all the time. And I think, maybe Nicola, you want to start on that. I mean, what do we mean? Let's try doing a definition of sustainability.
Sustainable. So sustainable, I think, means ongoing. So it's truly embedded in your organization. So, and then from, I'm often online saying data governance is not a project. And none of the data activities should be a project. This is all about viewing it as a change management. Yes, we have to have an initiative to implement things, but at the end of the initiative to actually design and implement it, what we actually want is this to sustain and to survive. This is not as I was told in the early days quite often, I'll be glad when you finish your project and go away, and then I can go back to how I used to do things. We don't want that. That's not sustainable at all. And I think the other thing about being sustainable is it's got to be manageable as well. because, you know, if we set our standards too high, like I did in the early days, I was up in my ivory tower preaching that everything had to be perfect and wonderfully managed. And actually that means there's controls on everything. Nobody can do their job for the amount of controls you've put on it. So it's got to be manageable and pragmatic, I think, is really, and it's got to deliver something for people. So you've got to find a way of putting into everything you're doing. So that could be new project checklists, or have checkpoints that you've got data defined and data owners agreed. You know, and like MI, BI reporting. One of my clients I'm working with at the moment is actually now doing that to say that if you ask for a report, you need to tell us which entry in the data glossary you mean that you want on there. And if it's not in the data glossary, we have to get definitions done and agreed, because they waste so much time writing the report that somebody asked them for, and then they get the report and go, well, that's not what I wanted. So they're looking at, you know, all these are all little ways that you can start really embedding data governance and this data culture into everything you do, so that people start realizing it's a part of everything they do, not a one-off project. I don't know, I'm sure you've got some stuff to add to that, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, it's that thing about it not being a project. We keep going back to it, but if you don't look after it and you don't keep telling people about it, then it will slip back. It does take a long time to embed itself, because it's quite hard for people to see sometimes what's changed, or the changes are quite small to start with, or then it doesn't affect their domain. So I think communication is really important about sustainability. Is if you can't tell people why you're doing it, or what you're doing, or how you're doing, there's a good chance they'll forget what you're doing. And I think if you think about, you know, sustainability is across the whole piece around data culture. But if you think about in terms of data governance, sort of what Nicola was saying, just to build on that, is you can't start with technology. It was interesting. We put one of our things up, didn't we, this week about saying, you know, don't start your data strategy with technology. And well, we got a lot of support for that, a lot of love. But people do, don't they, Nicola? All the time. We still see it.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
You know, because it's, I wrote something that I should have written years ago, which is it's easier to sell a shiny tool than it is to explain a data governance framework, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It is you know, so people do still go, I want a Tableau, I want a business objects, I want a, you know, even I want an Alteryx, I want something that's going to make my data look pretty, that's going to answer the questions I can't currently answer. The problem is, you know, it is garbage in, garbage everywhere. So I think that would be my key thing about when I think about DG. And the other thing is just the top, you know, trying to push data governance, data management upwards is just about impossible. But if you do want people to lead from the top, you've got to give them something. You know, you've got to say to them, this is why we're doing it, and this is what it means to you. And if you sponsor it, this is what you're going to get for it. And you know, I'm the same as Nicola. I used to try and appeal to people's higher purpose. But wouldn't it be fantastic if data was an asset at the University of X? And you know, zero traction. But if it is, as the vice, you know, as the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Education, these are the things that you need to be, you're being measured on. Here's where we can help you. That's a different conversation. So I think there's that, and I think that comes with, you know, you've got to show value. Right? You early, you know, don't spend a year building a framework. You know, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to show people that you've been successful. And I think you also can be honest in saying this isn't working, we're prepared to pivot. Don't be a framework ideologue. You know, I have spent too much of my time on the internet and arguing with people about how good TOGAF is. Right? Don't do this with data governance. I think sometimes people say we've got a framework and it'll work for you. It just won't. You've got to build the framework that's, you know, yeah, you take all the good stuff that people like Nicola and I do, but you still have to be spoken. You have to make the narrative work for your organization. It has to talk in your language, and it has to feel authentic. And if you don't do that, I think it's very difficult for that to be sustainable. I've certainly been guilty when I used to work at Deloitte, where we used to give people frameworks and leave, and they looked amazing, but I knew that they weren't implementable because we'd just given them the same one we'd given them the company down the road. So that's kind of where I would probably talk about sustainability in DG. What you got to add to that, Nicola?
I think I started off, didn't I, with sustainability, and you added.
I may have provoked some more thought, or not.
No, I think, you know, I suppose actually it would be a really good time to move on to actually how do you make data governance sustainable? Because we've been talking generically, but I think veering into the data governance part of it as we were doing it. So, you know, I think a lot of it we've been talking about anyway, about it's not a project. You know, I don't know, what else would you, if I said to you, put you on the spot, Alex, how do you make data governance sustainable? What would be your top 3 things?
I think, yeah, I kind of talked about it because I did kind of wander into that question, didn't I? I think it is definitely not being a project. It's about it being culture led, and it's being sort of top level supported, aligned to what the organization wants. They would be my top 3.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I'd probably just add to that about it. It's really important to take everybody with you, as you know. I think hopefully it's come across from what we've been talking about. You know, for this culture change to work, we can't just have the people that are responsible for implementing data governance thinking it's a good thing. We need the whole organization. So this is all about, you know, not taking this data literacy for granted is a, you know, a really key thing. You get data. You wouldn't be doing the jobs you're doing if you didn't. But it's very easy to assume that everybody else understands it in the same way that we do. Whereas for an awful lot of people, before you start doing this kind of initiative, data is almost like a necessary evil. It's the inconvenience in their job. They don't think that it's got value or that it could make their life better if it was better quality or better understood. So yeah, and I think that, you know, sometimes a lot of the comms and things we're doing are not on this is data governance and how to do it. It's this is what data we have. This is why we want to manage it better. This is what we get if we have better quality data.
Yeah, I think that's all good stuff. Nothing to add there. Always easier to talk about it than it is to do it, but I think that's been our lived experience with it. So we're going to kind of get into some more specific questions we got asked around how do you kind of do the whole DG thing. So I'm going to give Nicola these because she's more of an expert than me. So the first one we got was, how do you fix a data quality issue?
Well, that's this is like a how long's a piece of string question. When I read that and Alex said, do you want to answer that one? I thought, yeah, right. So it really is going to depend on what the issue is itself. But what I would say I think is really important is to take the time to research and find the root cause of the problem. I think people are always too quick to fix it at the point that they consume the data or that they notice the issue. So I see loads of people like put default values into fields when they load data into a data warehouse or a data lake. Because it was missing, so they must put something in there. And you're going, but why didn't you look into why it was missing? Is that because the person that's putting it in can't? Perhaps the entry system isn't working properly, or is it that that person wasn't trained correctly, or is it just that they're lazy? You know, we need to kind of work out what the root cause is, because we need to actually fix the root cause wherever possible. I don't always say, you know, we will always fix it at root, because you can't sometimes. I mean, one of my clients at the moment, the majority of their data doesn't belong to them. It belongs to their customers. Not just in a GDPR point of view, it genuinely comes from their customers and then they process it for them. So they don't own that data, and they provide a valuable service to their customers, but their customers are a lot bigger than them. So they can't go back to them. I couldn't go back to Alex and say, oh, the data you're sending us is rubbish. So we can't fix it at source. What we need to start doing is catching it at the moment it comes in, highlighting any issues, perhaps trying to influence our customer by sending reports or keep raising when things are wrong, kind of thing. So it's, you know, we can't always fix it at source. And I think I think it is this, taking this holistic approach is really, really key. So we've got to find out what caused it to be wrong, not just fix it at the point we're using it. And I think we also need to make sure that we understand the needs of everybody who's using that data, because quite often if Alex raised an issue, it's easy to say to Alex, what do you need done? Oh, well, we'll get that fixed then. And then, you know, somebody else in another department uses that data and it's changed. Now we know it's better, but that person didn't know it was going to change, and they might have had a nice little workaround that's now caused things to go wrong because the data's changed. So we need to make sure we get everybody involved. And I think, I'm trying to think, the other thing I would say on data quality issues is don't assume that technology is the source of all the problems. I think sooner or later, whenever I'm implementing such a process with a client, somebody will say, oh, I want some analysis because I want to be able to blame IT for how many data quality problems we have. And I go, well, I haven't done the analysis yet, but I can tell you it's unlikely to be mainly IT based. I'm sure your experience is the same, Alex, isn't it? But in my experience, most of the issues come down to people. So they either weren't trained properly, or they were trained properly, they're just not doing it. They just didn't understand how important it was to do it correctly. And sometimes processes are broken. And these are not things that we fix by fixing the technology. So yes, technology does cause problems, but it's not the sole cause, and quite often not the main cause of data quality issues. So hopefully that's given you some ideas on how you actually go about doing that.
Yeah, nothing to add to that. I think that's really good. I think that thing about fixing it for everybody and having that cross domains, so you've got stewards from all the different parts looking at it, rather than going, well, it's a finance issue. It's like, well, that piece of data might be used by 100 people. So, and I would echo your thing on technology. I think technology sometimes is poorly implemented around schemas, specifically around like, so I have to be trained in a specific way because the system will allow me to do bad things. That's the only thing I would say on top of that. The schema validation, I think, in a lot of systems is very poor. But yes, I agree. Apart from big integration issues, people tend to blame the technology. And all the technology is doing is surfacing bad data. You know, I think a good way to think about it sometimes is if you think about data as like being in a lake, not a data lake, but just in a lake. And every time it comes into you do something with it in a system or anything, is you're taking it out of that lake and then putting it back in for everybody else to use. And you know, the thing you got to ask yourself is, am I making it better or worse? Am I making the quality of that better or worse in that lake? And I think that's one of the ways when I think about issues is you know, am I improving the quality of the overall water supply? So I think the next one's for you as well. This is great. I'm loving this. Is so we got asked a question about saying, but I've done all this work, I've set the framework up, and then some key people leave. How do I manage that? So again, Nicola, I think you're the best one for that one.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say this is going to happen. You spend a lot of time and effort identifying and engaging your data owners, and then you get them to appoint data stewards, and you brief them, and then one or usually more of them leaves. They change role or they leave your organization, and it is so infuriating. But you have to stay on top of that, because if you don't, the whole framework starts to fall apart. And the culture falls apart with it, because particularly if your data owner's missing or the new person doesn't know they're a data owner, it's all going to start, you know, being forgotten. And, you know, if somebody isn't here telling me I have to do this, then I probably won't. And particularly if you've got a new person in role, they're probably trying to make some changes, make their mark. So we don't want them changing anything that we've done as part of the data governance work. So ways I've gone around this: in an ideal world, I'd get hooked into your leavers and joiners process, or whatever you have, if you have one, so that one of the check boxes on it is notify the data governance team. I wouldn't say notify the data governance team if they're a data owner, because you don't, if you put the onus on somebody else to have to check and know that, they're just not going to. But you just want to be flagged so you can go, I know that name, he's one of my data owners. Now, I was working with a small charity recently, and they said they didn't have one. So I went, oh, okay. And actually, I thought back to what I did the first time. So when I was in the bank all those years ago, they had a leavers and joiners process, but HR weren't overly polite when I asked if we could put data governance in it, because, you know, this is a huge organization, and I'm going, oh, and by the way, can I have a little bit in that as well? So they weren't having that at all. So what I actually did was I just had on my to-do list a monthly task, and I sent a really quick email with voting buttons to the data owners and data stewards. So it was 2 emails that basically said, hi, me again, just checking that you're still data owner for whatever. Can you just use the voting buttons? If they said no, I pick up the phone and say, why, what's changed? And sometimes I just gotten out of office and I'm leaving, or sometimes they'd come back and say, yes, I am, but, you know, I'm leaving and Fred's going to take over from me next month. So I would do that. It's basic, it's very manual, but it works. It flags that to you. But the other, more importantly, it'd be better to keep in touch with these people, maintain that culture. Because if I'm having a monthly meeting with data owners, then I hope that they might think to say to me as part of the monthly update, oh, by the way, I'm moving on, I'm leaving in January, and my replacement's joining in on X. Then I now know who the replacement is, and I now need to know if they're going to have a handover. Even if they do, they often forget to mention that they're a data owner in the handover. Let's be honest about it. But I give the person a little bit of time, not too much, to at least arrive at the organization. And then I send them an email, introduce myself, and ask if I can tell them about data governance and their role in the organization.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. nothing to add there. I think it is disappointing if you get people and they leave, but that's the world that we live in, and I think you've got to move on. Yeah, I mean, I always have a standard set of slides as well, or a standard way of introducing a new data owner, and it's always good. But yeah, I think getting them in the leaving process is good. I always tried to do as well, see if I could get anybody in the starter process just to sort of do a little bit of interrogation about what they've done in their old job and whether or not they might be somebody appropriate. But again, it's really hard to get HR to kind of buy into that, especially when your organization is at a low level of maturity. So, which kind of, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, that's true. I agree. It depends a lot on the maturity of your organization and how they think about things like that. So, but I think we need to move on to another of our questions. And I think it's time that you answered one. So one of the questions that we got asked was, how do I develop my data governance manager? Because I think it's fair to say, from talking to a number of my clients that I've helped recruit people over these, you're unlikely to get a fully experienced data governance manager just walk in and know everything. So, if you're trying to look for something, how do you actually, you've got somebody quite often who's just been appointed from within the organization. Alex just walked past somebody's desk while somebody was talking about data governance. Oh, Alex, you can be the data governance manager, and he's never heard the words before, kind of thing. That happens quite a lot. So how do you go about actually really supporting and developing your data governance to get the data governance manager to get the skills they really need?
Yeah, I think it's a long-term process, and sometimes it's a very lonely job. It's interesting. We started a thing in AG called the Data Governance Network, because just to bring data governance managers together, because a lot of times they feel very lonely. It feels quite a unique role in the organization in which they maybe don't fully understand what it is. There's no obvious training for it, or there's no CPD or anything like that. So I think when you're recruiting people, it's really important for them to get a view of what kind of skills do they have to start with? And a lot of time, not so much now, but in the old days, they used to come up with quite hard skills, like data analysis skills or even data architecture skills. And actually, for me, the key skills are more around soft skills. It's around sort of facilitation. It's around networking. It's around being a trusted friend to the framework. Because if you think of the data governance manager as a person that sits in the middle of the framework, then they are trying to get people to do stuff that they didn't used to have to do. And, really that's a soft skill thing. And they're also potentially saying to people, hello, Mr. Finance Director, I'd like your people to do some more work that's going to benefit nobody in finance at all. That is a set of skills. So I think there is something about how do you get these people to be agenda free? How do you get them to say, I don't represent the IT group or the planning group or the finance group, I represent, the organization. And really saying, how can I help you in the framework? What can I do? So, some data owners may say, I'd like to know a list of my burn down issues every month. I want you to tell me what's got. Some other people might just want to say, I want you to show me that in a heat map, align it to this KPI. So I think a lot of the time that the data governance manager just needs to understand his or her audience really well, especially with the owners who are generally quite senior people. And then with the stewards to really say, look, I'm going to support you. If you need to go to your data owner and say, I need more time, I'm going to come and sit with you and explain why that is. So I think becoming a trusted friend to the people in the network and to be agenda free are really important. And another thing is just to be somebody that has a way of measuring the framework, something agreed. We can talk a little bit about that later, but there's some qualitative stuff, there's some quantitative stuff, but being the person that preemptively says, how's the framework going, Nicola? You can say, well, this is how we've agreed to measure it, this is where we are, and this is where we're focusing it. I've seen some great DG managers in the people I work, but I've seen them change, and they've gone very much into a way where it's very non-invasive. They are, in the same way that data governance is essentially supporting your data strategy, I think your data governance manager is supporting your data governance framework. And it should almost be like, not that you don't know that they're there, but they're not somebody who you're thinking is a person that's going to come and ask you to do stuff. They're somebody that's going to help you to do stuff. So that would be probably my summary on it.
And I think when we were preparing and planning for this, you were talking about them teaching them not to have favorites, which made me laugh, because I remember more than once I've been told by people that I've been training and teaching while we're doing the work, that it appears to the data owner themselves that I do have favorites. Because I think Alex is right. You don't not do data governance over finance data because you don't like the finance data owner. But what you do when you talk to them is you make them all feel special. So there was one particular person I said, well, come around and we'll brief and talk to all the, the data owners, and you can see how it's done. And the first one went to, I think, was finance from memory. And the finance guy is saying, well, we can't do data governance here. It is just our data is so complicated. There's so much wrong with it. And we've got this other big transformation project going on. And instead of just saying, no, I went, oh my goodness, you have got a lot on it. It's really going to be important that your data's sorted before that transformation project. And obviously with being the finance hat on, you've got to have your data. And the data owner kind of went, oh, well, yes, I am very important. I have got a lot on. Again, well, we can help you. And they go, oh, that's great. And then we went to the next person who was like the opposite. We don't need you. Our data's great. Don't come and stick your nose in. Back off. And I just said to that person, oh, that's fantastic. And I could see the chap sitting next to me, like looking at me going, really? How's that fantastic? And I'm going, it's brilliant. You've obviously done some really good things. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Can you tell us who we should talk to in your department to get some real insights into what you're doing so that we can roll that out to others and use you as like a role model? And she was going, oh, wow. Well, yes, of course I'm a role model because we do things wonderful. Of course, it turned out she didn't do everything as wonderfully as all that. But so it is don't have favorites. You must be very objective in how you roll out data governance and what you do. But I would say do make your data owners feel that they're your favorite. There's a really good way of managing the relationship with them.
Yes, I know when you train, you're like, you're the best audience I had since the last one, aren't you? You always say to people, you're the most important, and
Yes.
I think that's absolutely right. And actually, I think that does bring us on to the next question, which is it's a good lead in, because one of the things is the data owners specific, the stewards are kind of doing the job that they were generally doing, but they're being codified and mandated, and hopefully it's more important. And they are getting something out of this, definitely. And the owners, sometimes it feels like an extra job that they're doing. They may not have felt like they're doing it before. And one of the only times you really get to bring them together is in kind of a data owners meeting. When it doesn't matter how often they run or they're very policy driven or operational driven. But I think there's lots of different ways you can run data owners meeting. But I think probably, it'd be good to get some of your insight, Nicola, about what are the key things when you're running a data owners meeting that you want to get across, and what is it that you're asking them for?
Yeah, so it's a good point. So I would say, I'm assuming that we don't know who asked this question, but I'm assuming you mean like the data governance forum or committee or council, not the one-on-one data owner meetings. So I think you want a number of things. I would view them as a really good chance for you to do your continuing communications and briefing so that they're getting the clear messages and hopefully are then sharing them on with their teams. I also think you need to do them in the early days, they're almost like steering your initiative and the implementation of this framework. So, a lot of the time you may be feeding them the proposals, the ideas, but they're going to say, yes, we are going to do finance next, or no, we want to do HR data next. It's all going to be, you've told them that they're the powerful, important people when it comes to data. So you can't then tell them what's done next. So you always have to be getting them to give you a steer and approving what you want to do. And the other thing I would do is data quality issues. So these are senior people. They do not want to know everything. They don't want to know when there was a typo and you had to ring, Nicola and tell her to go and correct it and spell it correctly in future, or stop putting 5 zeros on by leaning on the keyboard. But there are going to be material or critical data quality issues, and they need to be shared with the data owners meeting. I would also share with them perhaps where there's less critical ones that just haven't been resolved for ages, if there's blockers or obstacles in getting them solved. So I'd get all those escalated there. And I agree with what Alex was saying. It's always this conundrum. How often do you have the meeting? Because in my experience in the early days, I would kind of say, well, we've got to have it monthly. And I would, as anybody who's tried to do data governance zones, it moves really, really slowly. So I'd get to the next month and not much had changed. And I'm insisting that these senior people come to a meeting to hear me talk and tell them what they already knew, because it hasn't changed from last month. So, I would say aim for quarterly is what you're aiming for ultimately, but I would go monthly in the first months and eke it out to 6 weekly to 2 monthly, because in the early days, people don't tend to do any of the actions that you've asked them to do until you send out the reminder that there's the next Data Governance Council next week. Then they do their actions. So until that really, and this comes back to this sustainable and embedded, until they start naturally doing that they remember that that's part of their job to do it, and they don't just do it when you remind them. I would have the meetings more often than not. But don't be afraid to cancel it or reschedule it if there really is nothing to discuss with them. Because otherwise you just you're just boring and wasting these people's time, and you do not want a reputation for that.
I think that's a really good summary. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. There's something as well. Sometimes I will ask specific groups about saying, look, we know this organizational thing is coming down. Let's say we're going to redo, there's a big reorg going on. That's going to massively affect the data because our organizational hierarchy is going to change. What can you tell me? What early sight can you give me? So we're not going to find out at the end and do a bodge job like we've done the last 5 times. So sometimes I think they are a good group to, so I did one the other week, and they were just, it was international recruitment. They're just kicking off a lot of new international recruitment, sort of post-Brexit, a different way of doing things. And I was asking them what data they were collecting, how they were using that. It was really useful. We're not starting until like sort of December next year nearly. It's like, but if we don't know now, it'll be December next year, and then we'll be bodging it. So sometimes that group is great to be able to, maybe you can find out stuff that you wouldn't find out anywhere else, or they maybe wouldn't tell you at other times. So otherwise, yeah, I would completely support everything Nicola has said there. Yeah, monthly it's pretty bad if you've only taken 2 issues off the issue list. It's not a great meeting, is it?
No, and unfortunately, data governance does take time. It just doesn't go quickly. So yeah, you got to manage that one. So the next question is one I get asked so many times, and it's not easy. So I've decided that I'm going to ask you it, Alex, because you might tell me something that I don't know. Is how do you report on data governance? What are these, KPIs that we can do to say that data governance is going well?
Yeah, and I think again, I'll have that piece of string if I may, because it depends how your organization works. I mean, we kind of have, Nick and I kind of have a basket of ones that we get people to choose from, and we do encourage people to think about them 2 ways. To think about them in terms of how is the framework developing, certainly over the first couple of years. So you can look at things like, how much coverage do I have of my domains in terms of my stewards and my owners? How good is it? How many people have responded no to my emails? So what's my coverage? What's my maturity around that? You can look at issue burn down rate. You can say, how many issues have we raised? How many have we closed? We can look at maybe themes. How many ones have we addressed that have fixed more than one issue? So there's lots of different ways. How many risks have we raised? How many risks have we mitigated? So there's lots of ways that you can use quantitative metrics. So that's kind of like the way you measure the framework, essentially measuring it in almost like a linear fashion, looking to assess the maturity. I do try and use a maturity assessment for data governance. I try and rerun it every 9 to 12 months and see where we're better and where we're worse, because it allows us to pivot. It allows us to move and do things better, because your first plan will never be your last plan. We've all learned that. So I think maturity assessments are really important, and what's in them is really what's important to your framework. But those ones I've given you what we tend to use to start with. And then there's the thing about linking into other KPIs. So where you've got other key performance indicators around data quality, let's say for external reporting or internal reporting or something like that, you want to show that as you're starting to hit some of these quality issues, those KPIs are improving, and you can put a direct link. So there you're showing rather than showing the coverage, you're showing more of the maturity, how sustained, how embedded the data governance capability is, because it's starting to affect some KPIs that people care about. And then the other ones that are really important and often really get forgotten are the qualitative ones, the data stories, the ones where you go, well, this person used to spend an hour every day transferring this from system A to system B, but now they don't. We fixed that. Or this person couldn't use the data, so they had to spend Sunday afternoons doing this spreadsheet once a month. We fixed that. So the data stories, to be honest, are the ones that are almost more important, I would suggest, for some of your senior colleagues. When Nicola talked about advocacy being something that that's really important in a data governance framework, I think advocacy is easier if you've got some good stories to tell. So I'd like to feed my data owners some of those stories in a way that they can replay them to their senior colleagues. And frankly, it makes them look good, because they're saying, well, since I've been a data owner, look at this story. And certainly the world I live in, which is students and graduates and researchers, when you can talk about a student or a cohort or a course improving because of what you've done, that has huge currency across all parts of the university. So for other people it might be efficiency, for other people it might be risk, but if you understand the narrative and what feels authentic to your organization, finding stories. Yeah, I can't give you, is it a 6 or a 7? It's not a direct measurement, but it's a really important measurement. So I guess that's probably what I would say on that.
Yeah, and I think picking up on the stories is that quite often people want it only in monetary terms.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a client that wanted to know how much money's been saved by every issue being solved. And actually, you know, your story of, well, actually this employee does it on a Sunday afternoon. Well, we're not actually paying them.
Mm.
We've actually just given your employee better quality of life, means they're probably more engaged and more productive when they're in the office. So I think, you know, stories have a great value. And I would say whenever you do solve a problem, make sure you shout about it.
Mm.
For that reason, you know, and if you have a monetary value you can attach to it, then great, shout about that as well. But don't forget the stories. Just because it doesn't have a nice money number that you can put to it, just make sure you shout about it and say, look what we've done from having data governance in place.
Yeah, I
Really
mean,
good.
just actually on that, looking at time, but really quickly is I'm very cautious about money and time, because sometimes people equate that to, I don't need this person, you know, and sometimes what we find, Nicola and I will find, is that people will sometimes say, I don't want to talk to you because I'm worried that the job that I'm doing, you're going to take away and I don't have a job anymore. So a lot of what I talk about is like, nobody signed up to say, I want to do an hour a day of data management. Show me where that is in that person's job world. It's not there. So in fact, what we're doing is we're freeing them up to do the job that you're paying them for. You know, we're not it's not like they're going to sit on their hands for an hour that we've given them back. And I think that's really important. And sometimes when people start to ask me, you get it less in the university sector than you do in some of the sectors that Nicola works in, but where people go, I want you to give me an FTE, a full-time equivalent value or a cost value. I'm kind of cautious before, so I need to understand what that is, because I don't want to be part of some nefarious hatchet job. I think that's just something that I've seen a couple of times, and I'm very wary of it.
Yeah, and I think I've faced the same, but what I often find is, you know, you can sell it, you flip it and you say it the other way, and you start saying, you know, but you know, what if, you know, they're spending X amount of their time doing something they shouldn't be doing, but you're paying them to be, you know, to be an expert in something. So one insurer I work with, we discovered that a student actuary was spending 2 weeks every quarter reformatting a spreadsheet before it went into their reserving model. Because the spreadsheet was just atrocious data quality. He was fixing data, fixing formatting issues. He'd been doing that for 18 months because he was trained that was part of his job. So, you know, when we added up the amount of time he'd spent doing that, and instead of learning to be a proper actuary and doing some value adding tasks for the organization, and then the other one that I come across a lot is MI and BI teams.
Yeah.
You know, they spend so much time finding the data, fixing the data, trying to do something. Whereas actually they could be, you know, they have great insight into your organization and its data, but they don't have time to do that insight and analysis because they're too busy just doing the backlog of basic MI reports because it takes them so long to do because of the data.
Yeah, we justified our whole data governance framework on a planning director saying my analysts spend 6% of their time cleaning data, and he said, I think it's actually 80%. I think they're just not telling me. You know, that he's like, if I can get that down to 40%, I can pay for this framework for 2 years. I mean, that was so completely agree with that. That was the end of our questions, but we got an extra one in, and it's quite hard. So I think this one's probably yours, Nicola, to be honest. Which is, and we've sort of covered it a little bit, but I don't know whether we got something to add. So we had a question about saying, how do you embed? So rather than saying, how do you sort of, what happens when people leave? Like if you've got the roles of the owner and the steward specifically, you know, you train them, you show them what it is, you think they're in the job, but they doesn't feel like they're doing it. It doesn't feel like they've really said it's not optional. You know, they've not sort of said something else. So what we could finish, I think, on that. What kind of tips would you have for that kind of question?
So I think one of my first tips would be make sure you're actually asking them to do something, because quite often it sounds really stupid, but people say, all right, you and you're the data owners, go and get on with it. But if you're not asking them to do anything as a result, so make sure that there are things that they're being asked to do on a regular basis, and also that you as the data governance manager or whatever are following up with them and keeping in contact with them. This isn't I've designed a framework, I'm tossing it over to you and you get on with it. You know, it goes back to what Alex was saying about the data governance manager supporting the data governance framework, and that means supporting the people that are in it. The other thing I like picking up when you said about optionality when you were describing the question is how are we going to get this in the culture where people think that it's, you know, what we do. So I've seen different ways of doing it. Think back to one client who they were a warranty company. So you know, they were not what you'd call a data company. But the first time I went into their organization, they've got all these posters up on the wall saying, "We are a data company." And I went, "Wow, that's amazing." You know, you've actually realized that you're a data company. And they went, "Well, some of us have. We're trying to get the message out to everybody else." So, but that meant every time a data owner or a data steward went in a lift or walked out, on the wall in front, there was a reminder: we're a data company. Data's at the heart of everything we do. And I think that was a good way of, you've got to do things that stay, you know, so you stay in mind. And the other one is, work out how you can embed it in the culture of your organization. So I've done some work with an organization. I don't have many competitors, so I can't tell you exactly what they do, but they work in an area where health and safety is really, really important. So much so that you're not allowed into their building as a visitor unless you've seen their health and safety video and signed your life away. You're not allowed to carry drinks without lids. If you're on the stairs, you mustn't carry anything, and you must hold onto the handrail. You can only walk through certain paths in the car park. And it's not, you know, when I was first told it, I kind of giggled. And it was like, no, this is really, really serious. They were having quite a lot of accidents, and they solved it in the dangerous part of their operations, and then realized that they were still having a lot of accidents in their offices. And so they have this whole culture. Every meeting starts with a safety moment. Somebody announces what they've discovered. And, you know, I found it a bit strange because I've never worked in that kind of environment before. But the data governance lead said to me, "I want data to be the same." He said, "Let's face it, we're never going to get a data moment at the beginning of every meeting, but I want people to take it as seriously and accept it's part of what we do." So I think, you know, there's ways of looking at that, getting that messaging across. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, what you were saying is it's not optional. So you need a strong sponsor that's supporting you, and you need to be doing things, holding your data governance meetings, asking them to solve issues, deciding what we're doing next with the data governance framework. Because if you just appoint people and leave them to it, they won't do anything. They'll forget that they'll leave, and they won't tell you unless you've got your nice monitoring task set up. You know, and they'll just die off and stop doing things.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Not really much to add on that. And I think also, other than maybe explain to people that, you know, it's we're building rockets, not shuttles, which is this kind of idea that we're not going out and building this really expensive rocket that's going to fix one thing and then never be used again. We're building shuttles. We're building things that we can reuse, you know, processes, people, ideas, but they take longer to develop. You know, so you know, we know people are going to get very excited when we talk about being data enabled and maybe having a strategy and building a governance framework, and that's great. We want that excitement, but it takes time, you know, and it's not going to feel like the work that you're putting in to start with. You're maybe not seeing as much reward, but you will get there because you're building a shuttle. You know, what we're always doing is just building these bloody rockets, and you know, we've fixed that day's quality issue, and next year we'll have to build another rocket to fix it again. So I think it is that there's a little bit about, you know, can we just stop the instant gratification for a year? Because it's going to take us that long for us to, you know, we're going to show some early wins, but it's going to take us that long before we're in every project and all that kind of stuff. So that's the only thing that I would add. Yeah. So that's the end of our list of questions. In fact, the end of our list of webinars for this year.
It is, but I was going to say, if anybody had anything to put in the chat, but I know I'm going to pronounce your name incorrectly, but Subi has been very busy putting questions in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
So if anybody else has got any questions, you can add. So Subi's put 7 questions.
We're going to struggle to get through those. Do you want to pick your favourite out of those, Nicola? We'll try and answer them afterwards, by the way. We'll put it in LinkedIn.
Yeah, also, I would say, Subi, I think some of your questions are answered in our previous webinars as well. So I'd really recommend that you go back and watch them. And some of these we perhaps might pick for topics for next year. I do like how is data governance interconnected with data engineering, and which comes first?
Oh, crikey. Again, give me a definition of data engineering. I mean, I think the two things live in hand. I think a lot of the things that a data engineer would do is based on needing some high quality data and good metadata. So they are a customer, but I also think the things that they are doing affect the way that you build your framework, affect the way that you build your quality, and therefore they are somebody that can help shape the framework. I mean, that's my, you know.
Yeah, I'd see them as key consumers of the data. Yeah. So I would say it's a term that, well, perhaps from my experience, wasn't used until the last year, 18 months. And it's just suddenly came. And before that, it was your ETL team or your analytics team. So data engineering is all about getting together data in one place so you can do clever things with it. So it is, as Alex said, totally interconnected, because actually the data engineering people can't be that successful if they haven't got data governance in place, because they won't know where the data is, what it is, and what it should or shouldn't be used for, and is it good enough quality to use. So they're going to have problems. I mean, and one of my clients last year actually had an overarching data team, and data engineering was one part and data governance was the other part. So they did realize that they had to be really, really well aligned. And then just looking at the time, I can do what's the difference between, how's data quality different from data governance? So it's, I would refer you to the DAMA wheel. So if you search for DAMA wheel, so DAMA is the Data Management Association, and they have a body of knowledge known as the DM box, so the Data Management Body of Knowledge. And they've summed up everything that's covered, all the topics covered in that, with a wheel. And what you'll find, it has all the segments around the outside, and in the center it has data governance. One of the various things mentioned on the outside is data quality management, and you also have things like data modeling, data architecture, data warehousing, metadata management. And I think it's, what you should understand is that everything on that wheel is data management. Data management is made up of a number of different disciplines and things that you do to manage your data better. And those disciplines are usually done by different specialist teams, apart from data governance and data quality. Some people do have separate teams, but I think what it's fair to say is that data governance gives you the framework of roles and responsibilities and processes. But the primary aim of doing that is to manage and improve the quality of your data. So there's a very blurry line over where it stops being data governance and where it starts being data quality. And in my experience, it works best when it's done on the same team, because otherwise you're saying, well, do I do it or do you do it? And I worked with a client earlier in the year who the data quality team was seen as amazing because they fixed problems, they did data quality reports, they helped the business. The data governance team were seen as a pain in the backside because they were asking you to write definitions and document data lineage. So they were doing all the foundational stuff that we know is valuable, but without being seen to be doing the things that the business wanted.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think it's one of those things you don't die on a hill for. I've seen lots of definitions, data governance is doing the right thing and data management is doing the thing right. And then I've seen it about, data governance is the pipes and data quality is the water. But honestly, I think Nicola's definition is better. It is, if you want great data quality in a sustainable way, you need a data governance framework. And if you build a data governance framework and you don't care about data quality, what the hell are you doing it for? That would be my summary.
Doing it for fun.
So yeah, it's good. It's a good question, but I think the theoretical answer is less interesting than the practical answer.
No, that's true. So so looking at, Sylvia's asked a question as well. So I would say that let's answer Sylvia's because we had quite a lot from Subi. Sylvia has asked, do we have any experience in implementing data governance and a data governance tool at the same time? And what was the result? So I'll go first. I would say you can do them at the same time, but you need to have a head start on the data governance as a whole first. So the one time that I've seen them start at the same time before I got there, I kind of was brought in to resolve the train crash that had happened, because you had a data architect and an interim data governance manager before me that well, they had a great time. They were lovely people. I still keep in contact with them, but they data geeked out on setting up this tool in the most complicated way possible. And you have to remember, it's going back to something that Alex had said earlier, the business didn't ask for this tool. It's not helping them do something that they did manually before. It's helping them to do something that is new and additional. So they're going to be really anti it. So my recommendation is start data governance, get your head round what it is you want it to do for your organization. Start doing your data glossary on an Excel spreadsheet. And once you've worked out what you want, then get a tool and it can help. I don't know what experiences you've had, Alex.
Very similar. I think if you let a DQ or a data profiling or data quality tool lead your data governance, you will end up doing image, and I think that's the wrong way to do it. I certainly, most places I've worked with, it's taken us a year before we've gone for a tool, because A, we wouldn't have got the money, and B, we didn't know. Did we want a metadata management tool? Did we want something that's very strong on profiling? Did we want a data quality reporting tool? You know, which one was most important to us? And I think otherwise you will end up being, you know, you'll buy a product and the product will somehow frame your data governance network, and that doesn't make sense to me. So I think it's great if people have got budget for it, and you know, it shows that maybe there is a real interest in this, but to lead with it, I think it makes the job of building and sustaining the framework extremely difficult. And I also see a lot of justification then for using the tool, and that tends to disenfranchise the people that you want to use it because of what Nicola said.
Yeah, and I think that really leads on nicely to Francisco's question. We're saying, how much does having the correct tool affect the level of success in data governance initiatives? And I would say, look at what you've got in-house. Whenever I run my training courses, there's an optional second day, which is data governance clinic. And that's where people just ask loads of questions like this all day and keep me, you know, 100% focused and keep me really working out the answers to everything. But the last one we did, actually somebody said they didn't have a data glossary tool and they didn't know what to use. There was no budget and Excel was really frowned upon. They were being told to use it less. What were they going to do? And one of the other people in the clinic actually said, well, we've got a data modeling tool. I can't remember which one, but one of the, you know, fairly common ones. And that has glossary capabilities in it. And, you know, as somebody else on the call went, but is that accessible to everybody? And he went, yeah, because you can publish it as HTML pages, so we can put it on the internet. And they suddenly realized that they had a tool that was for something else that they could use. So I think that was interesting that you'd use the word correct tool. I think there are loads of things that you might already have in-house that you could use. What I would say is that all of these things will be, you know, limited. They're not going to be the perfect tool, but I think they help you work out where you can add value. And I've seen people use that as a way to then get budget approved. So I was talking to somebody this morning who said, do you think we need Calibra? And I said, I think the question is, do you need a tool? Calibra is very, very good, but it's very, very expensive. And he went, oh, well, we haven't got budget for that kind of thing. And I said, but you just need to start doing this. And, you know, we'll start with Excel, and there are some cheaper, smaller, obviously less functionality players out there as well. So perhaps look at one of them if they're going to be more affordable. So you don't have to have the absolutely correct tool. And when it comes to like data quality, there's free data profiling tools and data quality tools. Yes, they're limited in their functionality, but there's a lot that's available that will help you get started.
Yeah, just really briefly on that. I think sometimes I've seen a tool really enhance the capability of a data governance framework once it's already established, because it's able to do things that took the data governance manager lots and lots of time, and maybe showcase it in a way that will make it more attractive, make it more people look at it, and also give you maybe early sight of stuff that's very difficult to automate before. So I think it enhances the capability and maybe gives you some more, almost like it feels more professional, but it doesn't, for me, fundamentally change the capability. And also what I'm going to be doing with that tool is I'm probably going to be asking my stewards primarily to be doing quite a lot of work with it. So I need to be absolutely sure that I'm not going to make their life worse by doing that. So again, I think unless you've had the lived experience of running the framework, you really don't know whether or not that tool is going to be better. And the problem, I keep going back to, once you've invested in the tool, there is this thing that you've got to make it work, and sometimes that's to the detriment of other things. So I think it's something that it's important, but you need to treat it with care. I would say it's not a buy a tool and things will be better.
No, that's very true. So I think I'm just looking at the other questions that Subi answered. I really don't think we will have time to answer all of those. But I would definitely encourage you to watch the replays of the other webinars, which are available. They will definitely help you, particularly the one about the data strategy will really give you an idea. We haven't done much on metadata management, but metadata management is just managing the data about your data. So it's another discipline, but it's so closely aligned to data governance, because if you're building a data glossary for data governance, that's the start of it. So you do that from a business point of view, but you then manage the technical metadata as well. And if you do have a tool, because that's why I picked on this one, it kind of rounds off all our conversations nicely. They will do the metadata management for you as well at both the technical level and the business level. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's good. So it's probably just worth to say, well, thank you for your time, definitely. And anybody that stuck with us for all four of them, well done you. We should have,
Definitely more than four. But yeah, we knew that perhaps this wouldn't be the best week. I think people are winding down or finishing things up desperately before the year end. So thank you for joining us live.
you want to talk about what we're going to do next year, really briefly?
We could do, yeah. So we've really enjoyed answering everybody's questions because we thought this was a really good way of helping people solve their problems. But yeah, we do get the same kind of question time and time again. And Alex came up with a really good idea that it could be our theme next year. So do you want to elaborate, since it was your good idea?
Well, we've got a couple of ideas. We're either going to run some masterclasses around specific things, which might be how do you buy a tool? Probably not, but certainly there'll be some things about what did you do in the first 90 days. We get all this kind of question: what's a good data owner? So we think we're going to pick some themes and kind of run masterclasses, some more in-depth sessions for you, and we'll get you to help us decide what they are. And we're also going to do some things around a day in the life of, this I'm going to call it lived experience. This idea that what is a day in the life of a data owner? What is a day in the life of a data steward? What is a day in the of a data consumer? And we're going to try and give you an idea of what it feels like when a framework's embedded, because that's the stuff we get asked all the time, and we've got it today as well, which is what's that person do? So we're going to try and focus on that next year and give you some real live examples and kind of give you some walk you through what a day would feel like if I was fixing an issue. What might that actually feel like? What would I be doing? So we're going to try and narrow in on some of the things that you asked us for and create some masterclasses and put those up there. We're not quite sure the date yet because Nicola and I are rather busy working on a whole bunch of projects, so we're not quite sure when they will be, but we're certainly going to do some things before the spring, and we will be looking to our LinkedIn contacts and our groups to help us understand what are the most value. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was everything. So yeah, thank you very much. We're getting feedback already. Vinca is looking forward to the masterclasses and day in the life, which is great. We'll hopefully we will see you all at our sessions next year. And yeah, I think it's only say I was going to say happy Christmas, but that might not be your thing. But very American, can we say happy holidays? And season's greetings. And hopefully we'll all have a much better and healthier new year.
Good stuff. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.